It's time for the Cyber Executive Podcast, where we'll be talking with the top executives about risk, technology, and leadership. I am your host, Mark Ashworth, and today I have the pleasure of having my friend Gary Chan, who is the CISO with SSM Healthcare, here today. Gary, thank you very much for being a guest on my latest episode of the Cyber Executive Podcast.
Hey, awesome to be here. Thanks for having me, Mark.
Yeah, great. So, a little thing for our audience that some people may not know, but Gary is not only the CISO of a very large healthcare group, but he's also a security mentalist and displays his talents in front of large audiences all over the world. So, I know you've been sharing your techniques at various conferences and corporate retreats and large audience to educate them on security, fraud, and increasing engagement in terms of leadership. But can you kind of tell us what is a security mentalist and how and help the audience understand what is this thing. So it sounds super intriguing.
Awesome. Well, thanks for bringing it up, Mark. So, a security mentalist is my way of telling people that I engage people in security topics, and I do so through fun mind games, right? So, everyone thinks of the Mentalist, like the Mentalist TV show, or maybe someone that they saw on America's Got Talent. And those are essentially similar to the ways in which I engage everyone, whether it's the board level or it's other employees or it's just my audiences. What I want to do is bring a lot of fun to whatever it is that it is, a presentation or a keynote or just general events.
It's definitely a super cool approach and everything off of it. So tell me, how would you or what? Give me some tips on how you would use this or how to engage teams in something that you're wanting to accomplish. So give me some
Sure.
tips on that.
Sure. So I'll give you an example where let's say that you have like a board meeting, right? And at most board meetings, or at least many board meetings, they usually have food, whether it's lunch or dinner. So imagine this. Let's imagine that your board is having lunch and say they ordered some Chinese food. You could have some fortune cookies custom made. You can order these online. And you can put whatever message you want on it. And just imagine that whenever the CFO finishes his lunch and gets a fortune cookie and opens it up and it says, "Today is a great day to increase the security budget." It's just really fun. And these are the types of things that I will do on a regular basis. It catches people's attention. People don't expect it, and it keeps it light. So, they are now associating you with positive thoughts. Even though it has nothing to do with security, it really helps with the image and reputation.
Yeah, I'm going to have to remember that. That's a good tip there. Get that subliminal messaging then to them, right? So,
That's right. That's right.
so what about leadership in general? So you're in a team meeting that might have the CFO or something in it, or whatever. But what about with just leadership in general? Maybe you're engaging with or trying to build that relationship with other divisions of your company. What sort of techniques would you use or tips would you have there?
Sure. I think the most important thing about being a mentalist and is thinking about things from the other person's perspective. So I kind of look at it like a marketing campaign, right? So if I've got, say, I'm just making up a number, 100 people on the team that I want to share my ideas with, and so on and so forth. I will segment them into different groups based on whatever it is that I want to talk about, right? Some people learn better with theory. Some learn better doing hands-on. Some have particular ways of thinking, right? And so when I know the people on the team, I can segment them into different groups, and then I'll have a different group meeting actually for those topics. For the theory guys, I'll do some theory stuff. If some people want some practical applications, I'll go in with a bunch of stories. I will segment it into 3 or 4 or whatever makes sense. And then we also have a group meeting together so that we can talk about it. But by then, the hard part's over, right? So I think it actually saves a lot of time. It may sound like more work, and I think it's harder, but it's not more work. Because in the end, when people are on board, it really only took me 5 meetings versus one meeting to tell everybody and a whole bunch of people spinning off and wasting their time getting upset or whatever, and then me getting the feedback and trying to like fix it, right? So it's actually a time saver, and I just basically use some of these marketing techniques for that.
Very cool. So, I think one of the big things, as a CISO or CIO is being a translator when you're talking to, non-technologists, whether it's to the CEO or other executives. And, so becoming that translator and trying to explain the technology or the strategy and explain that why something needs to be done. How do you recommend explaining the why to those other leaders to get their support and to have that dialogue and to build onto that? What tools or tips do you recommend there?
I would have two things. One is the approach, and the second is the tool that I use to do that. So the first is just pretend that you don't know anything about technology. So if you can explain it to somebody who doesn't understand technologies by just pretend like you don't know all the words and terms and definitions and all that, it makes it a lot better. Now you can say, hey, Gary, that's easy to say, but it's hard to do. So that's why I have a tool. And the tool that I employ is that's what the intern is for. So the intern really doesn't know a whole lot. Maybe they studied some of it in school. And guess what? That's probably the same baseline as these other executives who are very senior, and they definitely know more than the intern, but they don't know more about your area than the intern. And so if the intern can understand what you're saying and say, I get it now. Yeah, that makes sense. I should do that. Then you've got a good pitch.
I guess the difficulty would be judging if the intern is saying, yes, I understand it because they want to get that permanent position, or do they really understand it then, right? So
Yeah. Well, I think you can figure that out. But yes.
make sure they're not a theater student where they're really good at acting on that, and that they're transitioning right to an IT career versus theater or something.
That's right. Then make sure they're not using ChatGPT. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, yeah. You're actually seeing their faces, in the video call if you're doing it that way. So, talking with the teams and everything is always important, and as the leader of the team to get your strategy out there and your vision. And I know you've kind of hit on it just a little bit and everything, but can you kind of elaborate a little bit more on how to effectively communicate to your team, what your vision is or where you're going, the strategy, and to bring those, help them also bring up new ideas, because you need your team to bring up those ideas too, to float those up.
Sure. I think a lot of it really is the engagement. So, uh, part of what I do is I want people to really feel it. And to do what you're talking about, what I find actually that works pretty well is if you can condense it into, say, a single sentence, your vision, right? Like one, two sentences, no more than three. It just at least helps people like say, okay, that's in that general direction, right? And then you're going to have basically a split of people, those that care, which is actually going to be your minority, and then those that don't care, which is the vast majority. So for those people, they're just interested in doing their own job. It doesn't really matter, right? For those who are more interested, you can just start sort of just ask open-ended questions and say, hey, why don't you talk about it? What do you think it means, right? And then that sometimes it gives you some really good ideas. But other times it tells you where they're sort of going off and veering off the road. And then you can correct them and you can say, actually, that's not what I mean. What I mean is this. What I find much less useful is doing a 30-page PowerPoint. I've done those as well. And people, they're lost, they're not interested, or, whatever. So I've actually kind of broken it down to be more of an interactive thing. So even though I know what it is where I eventually want to go, um, it's more of a guided session, asking questions and things like that. And actually, sometimes we end up not going where I expected to go because I learned something new along the way, and then I pivot from that. But I at least go in with a plan. But it's really more of that interactive piece that I think is the most valuable.
Mhm. Great. So, one of the other things that is always a challenge, I think, and is never the fun part of being a manager or a leader, is having those tough conversations. And And whether it's a personnel related issue, or maybe it's just bad news in general, hey, we got an incident here and you're trying to break that news. What sort of tips do you have for our audience on those couple scenarios there?
Sure. Well, having tough conversations is never a fun time. And while certainly there are going to be some people who, no matter what you say, no matter what you do, it won't be good. Um, I'll share with you a sort of a template for what I do that I think actually works really well, and that is sort of like a quadrant where there's sort of four. Where there are four quadrants, right? So along one axis, I have process, and along the other axis, I have outcome, right? So on the process side, I say, hey, were you following a good process or a bad process? And then for the outcome is, did we achieve what we wanted to do or didn't we? And those are two binary questions that put you in one of those four boxes. And the reason that I do this is because whenever people hear like, hey, things didn't go well or whatever, a lot of it is internalized and said, hey, I did something wrong, or I'm bad, or I'm not good, or I'm a bad employee, whatever that is. And that's what you want to avoid. And so if I can say, hey, your process, you followed a great process, the outcome was poor, that's not, then they can sort of separate themselves from that and say, hey, that wasn't necessarily my fault. And then they can start hearing the bad things that happened, and then just do it as a problem solving type of issue, right? So the four quadrants are, hey, good outcome, good process, sure, everything's perfect. Then there's good process, bad outcome. Well, I don't internalize it as me being bad, so I can just solve the problem. That's okay. And then if I have a bad process and a good outcome, then I was just really lucky. So at this point, it's your decision if you want to engage to try to, prevent in the future, this thing, from being lucky again. You actually want to have a good process. It's your decision, but they're not upset at that point because they're like, hey, it was great, it worked out, right? And then there's of course bad process and bad outcome. And for the most part, I think most people, they actually did have good reasons. So they had good process and all the other stuff. So it's usually not like a really bad process and a bad outcome. But if you do have those, then it is sitting down and listening and saying, hey, from my perspective, this is what happened. Do you perceive the same? Right? And give them that opportunity to talk about it. And just asking those open-ended questions to kind of just go along versus going in and saying, hey, this was bad, this was bad, this was bad. It just having that engagement, I think, helps quite a lot. But again, it's actually pretty rare to be in that lower left-hand quadrant. Usually it's a good process and a bad outcome.
Yeah, very good points. With everything that's going on, and once I think a true leader, one thing that they do is mentor or help inspire other leaders. So what advice do you have for those inspiring leaders that are trying to maybe become the next CISO or the next CIO, or even maybe a supervisor or manager?
Sure. I would say do a couple things. One is go on LinkedIn and look at the people who hold the position that you're interested in, right? Not necessarily for a certain company, but just like if they want to be a CIO of a large company, go look up large companies and find their CIOs, and just look at kind of their resumes, right? So how long did it take them to get there? What jobs did they have in the past? See if there are any sort of commonalities between them, right? That'll give you an idea, a blueprint almost of these are the things that I might need to do or the skills that I might need to learn. And then, of course, when you're on the job and you can actually see someone in action, just see how they behave, right? What are the things that they're doing, and then are you able to do those things, right? And so it's kind of comparing yourself, realistically, right, and looking at what other people have done and getting some of those ideas. And of course, you can talk to people directly, but I would say that you can actually learn quite a lot simply from observing. And I think what sometimes people may recognize is that they don't actually want the job because they realize that they have to do certain things, certain skills, whatever, that they actually don't want to invest in which case that's also helpful, right? So
Mhm.
that can help out a lot with that.
Yeah, and sometimes, if it's a technical position that they're in, they might not want to stop being technical for a period of time. And maybe the position is, no longer technical. And so maybe they're not ready for that, or maybe they're not ready to, manage people, in some way. And sometimes, you might have a team that you're basically like a kindergarten teacher and you're just trying to keep them down the right path, so you never know. So I want to take a moment here and kind of pivot a little bit to healthcare and talk about healthcare because after all, you're CISO of a large healthcare group. So where do you see the challenges in the industry right now happening? Because you see all the reports, and healthcare is like the number one targeted, and then finance is right behind it. So we're right behind you guys. So what's your thoughts on that?
Well, unfortunately, the business environment, as you said, Mark, is not great. Just a lot of negative from a operating cost perspective, where we're spending more than we're making. So I would say being able to prioritize is probably the hardest thing to do. But if you're talking about, if you're looking for a more technical answer, I would say it would be medical devices. Medical device security is really hard because there's so many different devices, right? That and all of them have their own proprietary operating system, and they're just all sort of separate. They're just all different, and they have different vendors, and they're also managed, with they also have approvals from the FDA, and there's a lot more red tape. So it's not like Windows laptops, right? Sure, I can buy a Dell or an HP, but fundamentally, it's kind of the same. Software, I'm going to buy the same. I'm going to buy the same antivirus software and things like that. But you can't do that for medical devices. So I would
Mhm.
say for healthcare, the biggest non-technical challenge is finances and prioritization, and the biggest technical challenge would be medical devices.
Mhm. Yeah, and I was in healthcare for quite a few years and stuff, and some time ago, but still that challenge hasn't changed any because you have IoT devices, but your IoT devices might be an MRI. It's not
Yep.
just a smart TV in a conference room someplace, and to be able to keep that up, keep it isolated and protected from something else that's happening, much like in a manufacturing environment of doing the same thing with maybe your CNC machines or something to keep them separated, but still being able to receive updates from the designers. It's challenging, and to keep those protected, and which keeps the patients protected as well. Um, with the healthcare and everything, and the constant threats, and the overall value of the electronic medical records. Um, how do you think that's going to really change going forward? Maybe is there new regulation do you think that needs to be done in order to better protect that, or to better maybe stabilize the healthcare industry, or maybe standardize them better? I know that it's highly regulated now in a lot of ways, much like finance is, but is there some sort of improvement that needs to be done from an industry standpoint?
Yeah, there's definitely more regulations that are. There's actually a new set of proposals uh, for the HIPAA security rule, and that's going to really increase the barrier, I think, or increase the threshold, I should say, which will actually be a barrier if everyone tries to achieve it, because some of these smaller organizations, I think, aren't going to have the funding to be able to achieve those, right? So, to your specific question, yes, there's definitely new regulations coming out. I think it'll hit a wall because nobody has. There's just the margins are so small in healthcare. It's going to be really
Mm,
hard to do that without increasing the prices for patients or getting grants from the government or something like that. So I think that the regulatory route might be very hard to do. Although other than that, the healthcare security teams, a lot of them talk to each other, just like I'm sure in banking and all the other
mm,
sectors, and even cross industry as well. I know we're in different groups as well.
right.
Um, that it's just sharing that information and doing that. So I think unfortunately, those are kind of some of the sort of the best answers. And then, of course, we've got our vendors who who mix all of our data together and then use that intelligence in order to help everybody. So a lot of these different things, I think it'll just be more of the same,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah. So enough of the serious questions. Let's have some fun questions here. So, with everything, working with people and everything, what are some things you wish people would stop doing?
Oh, I wish that they would stop using generative AI to submit their work. It's kind of obvious, especially, the AI always it hallucinates, right? So,
Mhm.
check the spelling, check all the stuff, but the point isn't to, you know, tick the checkbox. The point is the thought that goes into the work. And so when I get the generative AI stuff, I kind of chuckle because it's the person who's doing it completely missed the point of the exercise.
Yeah, definitely. And especially, I'm sure teachers and other groups specifically really wish people would quit doing that and start doing the work, right? So,
Yeah, and now we can use DeepSeek and send all the stuff to China too. So
yeah, yeah, definitely. So, so what is something in the industry that the security industry could do better?
I think it's engagement. So it's the thing that I try really hard to do, and it's just it's just getting people involved so that they engage, they think it's fun, and they bring you into those meetings. So I think that's probably the biggest thing that as a security industry that we can do versus be the guys that nobody wants to hear the call from. I want people to be happy when they hear from me, not afraid.
Yeah, definitely. What are some which was kind of similar to the first question, but a little bit different spin on it. What are you tired of hearing about in the industry? I'll give you my thoughts, but you jump right in there first.
Oh well, I think I sort of mentioned it earlier. It was really mostly the generative AI stuff. So I'd love to hear yours.
Oh, it was pretty much the same thing. AI, it's one of those things. Been hearing about it for 10 years, and a lot of it's been marketing fuzz up until now. And at least now there's actually generative AI to have something with. But yeah, it's definitely AI and all the marketing hoopla around that. So at least now it's kind of calming down, I think, and you're actually instead of the fear and uncertainty, doubt, or the FUD factor of it is kind of calming down a little bit, and now people's are actually starting to say, oh well, hey, maybe this could help us this way or that way. And so it'll be interesting to see over this next year on how it shifts and it actually becomes productive versus more fearful or just excited about it in general.
I agree, and I'll actually make one comment on that. I did have a sales guy reach out to me via text, and he asked me a bunch of questions. I responded, and so on and so forth. And they were some of them. It wasn't a whole lot, but it was a few different things, and some of them were kind of personal, like my hobbies and stuff like that. And come to find out, I was chatting with a robot. And that made me really upset because when I actually when it was finally time to meet that guy and he really had no clue what the robot did, it was just like I was actually just really really unhappy about that. So if you're gonna try to build a relationship, like make sure you tell people that it's like make sure you don't use a robot to do that. If you're just trying to collect information, using a robot is totally fine, but not to build a
Right.
relationship.
Right. Yeah, I had that happen or something similar on LinkedIn as well. It's like, oh, well, this seems kind of interesting. Start having conversation, and then all of a, I was just kind of like, wait a minute, this is coming back awful quick responses off of here. It wasn't even like it was a faking to try to be typing and stuff. And once I kind of saw that versus kind of flipping back and forth, I was like, wait a minute, this is just AI off of this. And then I started digging deeper, and it was an AI generated profile, but it was still being monitored by an individual, but they were basically using a fake profile to hide their identity. And it's like, wait a minute, you're trying to sell a security product and build trust, but you're being totally fake about this. So how am I going to trust your organization in the first place?
Yeah, that's
So
exactly it.
yeah. So, we're kind of early on here. We're still, at least time we're recording this is in January. So what sort of trends do you see happening this year, whether it's strictly in healthcare or just in general, regulatory? What do you think the industry is going to do here in 2025?
More volume. It's just more volume of attacks. Whether it's because generative AI helps to make phishing emails faster or whatever. Just seeing more, and trying to keep up. That's really the trend. I think it's just more.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm hoping out of it we see better products coming out to drive efficiencies in, whether it's in the SOC or whatever it might be. So I'm hoping it's that to free up some of the mundane stuff to allow for people to actually, be more efficient versus this fear of, oh, they're taking the full. No, we show me how you can drive efficiency and make things better is what I'm really hoping we're seeing more of this year and better products. So,
Yeah,
well,
completely agree. Let me know when you find them.
yeah, oh, definitely. I'll keep you updated on our semi-monthly chats, right? So
Sounds good, man.
well, Gary, hey, thank you very much. I appreciate you sitting in on this and all your wonderful insights and everything. It's definitely a master class here on communicating, and definitely appreciate it. Thank you very much, and we'll have to have you on again some other time.
All right. Well, thanks for having me, Mark. Hope you have a great day.
You too. Thank you.